Hey, welcome back for part two of our video lecture here on Tuesday. We have a few more slides to finish up. Still talking about that influential Supreme Court case of Brown versus Board of Education and the integration of schools. This one's taking place in Arkansas, Little Rock. All right, 9 teenagers integrate Central High School. They are known as the Little Rock Nine. And actually, next week, you guys have a primary source activity. I know it's your favorite thing to do, but it is over the Little Rock Nine, and you're going to be looking at some civil rights litigation and some events that occurred around the Little Rock Nine to see how this played out, because this is the first time really we're trying to have a mass integration of a large number of students. I know it doesn't seem like that many, 9, but at a public high school in an area that is very segregated. Arkansas is a very segregated state, and was not willing to budge on integration. So, Little Rock, Arkansas, you have these 9 students known as the Little Rock Nine. Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, there are 2,000 white students and 9 African American students. Imagine that. Walking in, if you're one of those 9, into a situation where there are 2,000 other students who aren't like you, all right? And you have this small group of people who are like you, but you're facing this resistance from the other 2,000. You're facing this resistance from the teachers, from the school administration. Every day you show up to school or you walk to school, people in the community are telling you to go home, to leave. They're throwing things at you. They're doing terrible things to you. And so this can become very stressful. You know, imagine being 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, or even 18 years old, and trying to go into the situation, especially trying to be a pacifist and using nonviolent action. So you can't retaliate against anything. A lot of high schoolers get upset and they have all this pent-up aggression when something like this would occur, and they want to fight, right? They want to get retribution. We can't do that, because as soon as you do that, then they'll expel you, and the school district wins, all right? So you can't allow the school district to win. The Arkansas National Guard is ordered to not let the students in. Now, here comes that question. Who's actually in control of the military? The National Guard, is it the governor who's in charge? Or is it the President of the United States, who is the commander-in-chief of all military forces? So we're having a little bit of a power struggle here between the governor of Arkansas and the President of the United States. On September 23rd, Eisenhower sends in federal troops to maintain order and enforce the integration. So here comes the United States military, and here is, on the other side, the Arkansas National Guard, and they're facing off with each other. It's like the Civil War is about to start again. The state of Arkansas is getting ready to fight federal troops. Well, eventually, the National Guard is going to step aside, and they're going to say, well, obviously, our federal troops are one and the same. We're both part of the United States military, all right? We are going to abide by what President Eisenhower has told us, and we're going to allow the integration to occur. Students have military bodyguards with them all day, every day. From the time they left their house to every single class. They would sit next to them in class. They'd be out in the hallway. They would sit with them at lunch. So imagine you're trying to make friends. You're trying to integrate yourself, but at the same time, you have this armed bodyguard that's there for your protection, and they needed them there because things were happening to them. Like there's a story of a bodyguard that was protecting a young woman who was part of the Little Rock Nine, and someone threw acid at her from a chemistry lab. He jumped in front of it. It got all over him and actually caused him to go blind. So he was willing to put his life on the line to protect this young student who is just trying to do what is their natural right. Their natural right is they're allowed to integrate. They're allowed to be part of this society. Okay? Now, looking back, this bodyguard said, I wouldn't trade this for anything. I'm glad I'm the one that became blind and not the student, because the student didn't deserve that. They have the rest of their lives ahead of them, and they shouldn't have to live in fear. I'm here to protect them. This is my job. And so that was kind of a big moment in American history of you're seeing a white soldier sacrificing themselves for an African-American student in their cause. And a lot of people start looking at that saying, more people probably need to be acting that way and less the other way. 8 of the 9 students finished the school year. One decided it was too much and quit, which you can't blame them because of everything that they're facing. All right. The next year, the governor of Arkansas closed all Little Rock schools and made all public schools private. Why would he do this? It's a good question. Well, if it's a private school, then you can pick and choose who goes to those schools. Now, he's still going to have public schools. And pretty much all the public schools are going to just be for minority students, African Americans. Well, he's not going to fund those public schools. He's going to put very little public funding into the public schools. And so, yes, he is quote unquote integrating with the poor whites and African Americans going to these public schools, but they're far below what the private schools will be. Now, the problem is, can everyone afford to go to a private school? No, it's too expensive. You have to pay your teachers. There's no state funding. There's no federal funding for public school or for private schools. And so this actually sets the state of Arkansas's educational system back like 20, 30 years, because the lack of funding going into their public schools, the schools start falling apart. The teachers start to leave. The education level is really low. And then you get into the 70s and 80s, and they start to get rid of these private institutions because no one can afford it, and they start going back to their public schools. Well, they have to start dumping thousands, if not millions of dollars into the public education system, and they don't have that money. And it's actually going to be someone who becomes a president later that helps reshape the public education system in Arkansas, and that's President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton did a lot with the public education system in Arkansas during his time there to help get it out of what it became during the civil rights movement. You see a photo here on the next slide, and if you notice one big thing, the photograph's in color, because things are starting to change as we're getting closer into time. You see the United States military lining the street, keeping protesters out of the way, allowing the students to go to class and enjoy that educational experience. Next, James Meredith enrolls at the University of Mississippi. So Arkansas and Mississippi, two really deep southern states that are very long held in their cultural tradition. James Meredith wants to go to college. He is a Korean War veteran, and so he's going to use his GI Bill of Rights. Public universities were also required to integrate based off of Brown versus Board of Education. James Meredith, who I said is a Korean War vet, decides that he wants to go to a public school, which he's allowed to, because the GI Bill will cover that. Ole Miss, or the University of Mississippi, as it's known, is a traditionally all-white university. How traditional? Well, their mascot used to be the Runnin' Rebs, all right? A guy dressed that looked like Robert E. Lee, wore a Confederate uniform. Their flag is a Confederate flag. Since that has been changed, and when I say since, about 5 years ago, they changed it to a bear that wears a Civil War outfit. And so it no longer holds that connotation. But during the Civil War, the university graves were actually the Ole Miss students who dropped out. So almost every single student dropped out of school. All the professors dropped out, formed this regiment to go and fight. And at Antietam, almost all of them were killed. Very few survived the battle. And actually the university closed down because they didn't have any students to come back. They all died during the war. So it's very long-held cultural traditions in the Deep South are there at Ole Miss. Ole Miss rejected his application, and the NAACP took up the cause for James Meredith, and they went and fought this in the court system. JFK wanted to uphold the Brown decision, and so he says, Ole Miss, you have to allow James Meredith to go to your university. On Sunday, September 30th, 1962, James Meredith secretly arrives on campus. And so the governor is working with JFK to get him on campus. But all of a sudden, the governor has a change of heart, and he says, nope, I'm denying you entry into the university because he's getting some pushback from the people within his own state. Kennedy then sends the armed federal marshals to protect Meredith. And what's crazy when this happens is there becomes a riot on campus. All right? And a lot of people thought this was the Second Civil War. You had white Southerners. Some of them were college students. Some of them were people from around Mississippi, Alabama, people that traveled in when they heard of James Meredith going to school there, and they start fighting. And for one night, there are American soldiers killed. There are white Southerners killed. And then everyone thought, well, the Civil War's restarted. It's going to happen again. There's going to be this huge rise up. Luckily, it didn't. And it ended peacefully the next day. Yes, there were casualties on both sides, but the fighting did not continue. Meredith graduated from Ole Miss in the summer of 1963 with his degree and was very influential in breaking the color barrier to these traditionally all-white universities in the South. All right, University of Alabama, Ole Miss, Louisiana State University, places like that that were all white before are now more accepting to African Americans. The next photo, you see James Meredith receiving his diploma from the University of Ole Miss. And this was kind of the final step in him showing that he had defeated segregation, that he had won in his battle. All right. Now, the last two slides we're going to look at. The first one's it's called Sitting Firm to Challenge Segregated Facilities. On February 1st, 1964, African-American students from North Carolina's A&T College sat at a lunch counter. Seems pretty normal, right? They all go in, they're sitting down for lunch. They stayed at the counter until the store closed. Well, that seems weird. Well, it's because they were refused service. So the owners of the restaurant, because these students were African Americans, just refused to serve them. So the students said, well, we'll just sit here. We're going to take up 4 seats. You're not going to make any money from these 4 seats the rest of the day. That's going to be their kind of pushback, all right? Protesters began sit-ins in towns and cities across the South after this. This is a very powerful thing. Think about it. If I get 50 people to go into a restaurant and it holds 60 total seats, and all 50 of us sit there, we want to eat. We are not, refusing service by any means. We have money. We're sitting there. We want service, but you're not going to serve me. You can't tell me to leave, right? I'm well within my right as an American citizen to sit in a restaurant wanting to eat with funds, with money to buy the food. If you don't want to give that to me, then that's your problem. So we are going to kill their bottom line and hurt the companies because they're not going to make any money. All right? Again, very similar to the bus boycott. If money is not coming in, businesses have to fold. And do businesses want to fold? No. So what they're going to do is eventually they'll give in. Local business owners and public officials gave in most of the time because they realized they need the financial assistance. They need to pay their employees. They need to make sure their company survives. Nashville became the first southern city to integrate completely. All right? And that makes sense because if you've ever been to Nashville, has anyone ever been to Nashville? Cool city, but it is a tourist attraction. Nashville is driven off of consumerism. It needs people to come in, buy, go to restaurants, go to museums, go to hotels, places like that. And so if you're going to alienate a part of the society, that's really going to hurt your bottom line. If they integrate, that's more money coming in, and it's going to help the businesses in that town. Now, real quick, we have a photo that we're going to end on. And when you look at this photo, you're looking at a lunch counter sit-in. And you're seeing, African American, you're seeing women, you're seeing white people all partaking in this protest. So it's not just like African Americans are the only ones sitting in. There are whites who are willing to buy that they're getting refused service because they're sitting next to an African American. Now, look at the protesters who are protesting the protest, which is weird, right? You have people that are inside the store protesting the sit-in that's taking place. Now, when you look at these people, something stands out. You probably guessed. They're wearing swastikas on their arms. So these young men are protesting African Americans and whites sitting together at a lunch counter, and they're using a symbol that was once seen and is still seen as hatred, that was used in the Holocaust and genocide. But all of a sudden it's acceptable because people in the South see it as a way to get their beliefs all around one idea, and the Ku Klux Klan starts to take the swastika and adapts it as part of their culture as well to fight the civil rights movement. All right, because it's going to accompany more people. You look at some of these people sitting at this lunch counter. That older man that's sitting there, he probably fought in World War II. He probably fought against the Nazis. So imagine how he feels, this younger generation, wearing this stuff, spreading this hatred. All right, and he risks his life overseas trying to defeat this enemy, who was once a huge enemy to the United States. So it just shows you how perception changes when times change and events change. All right? That's it for day 2. Continue working on your reading questions. Continue working on your vocab. Remember, tomorrow we got a quiz, so I will come back with our video lecture on Wednesday tomorrow. Have a great one, guys. Enjoy the great day outside. Enjoy the weather. I'll see you later.